What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks videos, this time for Wednesday, January 12th. We have a larger, I believe, 9-game slate after we already have had pretty solid slates to start the week. I believe 7 on Monday and then 6 on Tuesday or last night. Now we have 9 games. I think the NBA has hit more of their stride in the less of the 2-game slates, 3-game slates, and more of the more spread out where we don't have the 12 games on Wednesday and stuff. But they kind of change it all throughout the season. So we'll kind of see what continues to happen. I am your host, Justin Bales, joined by Spike. How are you doing tonight?
Not too bad. I remember we were talking about that booster shot yesterday, and honestly, my arm felt a little weak, but like it's really not that bad. It's probably the same exact thing as the first and second shot gave me. It just didn't really affect me too much. So fingers crossed on that one.
You lucked out on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, all the better. I hope that no one gets sick from it, but man, was it not good when I got that. That was one of the sickest I may have been in like the last couple of years. It was pretty crazy, but I mean, it kind of is what it is. We can get down to the 9-game slate. Before we get into it, if you enjoy the video, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. You can subscribe to the channel, mention anything that you want in the comments, including players that you're looking at. We'll let you know what we think about them. Obviously, this podcast can't go over literally everything, and news changes throughout the day. So if there's anyone you're wondering about, go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we will give you our honest opinion on them at the time that we see it. Starting with injury news, 9-game slate, so quite a bit. We actually have a surprising amount of questionable players, which obviously throughout the day as they get ruled in, ruled out, are going to completely change the slate. That's kind of how it works. But again, that's something that you can get on our website, dfskarma.com, where we have free articles. You can also get in our Discord for free, chat dfs.com. We'll be going over all of that stuff there. Or you can grab a core plays package at dfskarma.com/pricing and get into our premium Discord along with our projections, our core plays, actual core plays, and then also our premium content. But for the injury news, we start with Boston. Marcus Smart's doubtful. Peyton Pritchard questionable in Indiana. Karis LeVert, Chris Duarte, Malcolm Brogdon, and Goga Bitadze all questionable. Lance Stevenson, the man who has come back from the dead himself, is now, I believe, signed to a second 10-day contract, so he is still on the team. For Charlotte, you have Kelly Oubre, who just entered protocol. He is out along with Vernon Carey. Shake Milton is still out, but Tyrese Maxey is off the injury report, and Seth Curry is questionable for tonight. Markelle Fultz, Etuan Moore, Jalen Suggs all continue to be out. Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter Jr. are both questionable. Bradley Beal is out, while Rui Hachimura is questionable. For Dallas, you have Porzingis and Willie Cauley-Stein both out. On the other side, Ryan Arcidiacono is out for New York, while Kemba Walker and Nerlens Noel are both questionable. In Miami, Kate Okpala, Jimmy Butler, Markieff Morris, Marcus Garrett, and Bam Adebayo all out for the Heat. You have Dwayne Dedmon as questionable, and then Gabe Vincent is in. For Atlanta on the other side, Clint Capella is doubtful, but Gorgie Dang is off the injury report. DeAndre Hunter, Sharif Cooper, and Cam Reddish all questionable tonight. Alperen Sengun and Armani Brooks, both questionable for Houston. All out for San Antonio, Zach Collins, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Derek White, Doug McDermott, and Trey Jones. Thad Young is finally off the injury report. Isaac Okoro out for the Cleveland Cavaliers. On the opposite side, you have Rudy Gay, Elijah Hughes, Jared Butler, Rudy Gobert, and Udoka Azubuike all out for the Utah Jazz. Joe Ingles is questionable. Damian Jones and Rashawn Holmes, both out for the Sacramento Kings. Tristan Thompson is questionable there. You have LaMarcus Aldridge and Joe Harris, both out for Brooklyn. Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Nick Claxton, all questionable. So that's really big news in Brooklyn. And then you have Alex Caruso once again out for Chicago. I believe Kobe White got hurt last night, but returned to the game, so he should be fine for tonight. And that about does it for the injury news. We can get locked and loaded on position by position. So at point guard, who are you looking at here?
Yeah. So point guard is one of my favorite spots here tonight. There's a lot of people up top that look really nice, and I feel like it's probably it could be a double spend up on guards. I guess you could start out the top since he's point guard eligible. LeBron James gets a really good matchup against the Kings. He's not 12K anymore. He went down 300, which I guess works a little bit in his favor. But the Kings just can't play any defense at all. And if LeBron continues to take over like he has been, it's an obvious play. The same thing goes with Luka Doncic right below him. I really don't think I got to touch too much on those guys. You go down a little bit more. DeJounte Murray is still under 10K for some reason. He gets a matchup against the Rockets. A lot of those players are still out, so he's just going to absorb even more usage, and it's a really good spot for him. You go down a little bit more. Donovan Mitchell at 9,400 against the Cavs. He's kind of had a couple off games since having that rest day. So I'd be more than intrigued to play him in tournaments at that price. I really like this game in general. I think it's going to be a great game to watch. You go down a little bit more on the other side of that. Darius Garland has kind of fallen to 8,100. I feel like that's a little too cheap. He has been playing not as great the last two games, so I see why the price has dropped. But we have all seen his upside and him put up 55, 60 point nights, fantasy point nights. So I'm more than fine to go into him there. You go down a little bit more, and Cole Anthony at 7,400 against the Wizards with no Beal. I really like that. I think this game stays somewhat close without Beal there. So I feel like Anthony's going to have to do a lot to keep it close. You go right down underneath him is the obvious one again. We actually just got news that he will play in the back-to-back. Spencer Dinwiddie's price didn't change at all, I don't think. Stayed at a flat 6K. Another great matchup for him. He's going to absorb a lot of that usage. He's going to be handling the ball every time he's on the court, so that makes a lot of sense there. And if you really want a punt play here, and if you're looking to save, I played him tonight. He didn't really do well, but Raul Neto is only 3,400. He's going to get the minutes with Beal out, and if his shot is falling, he could easily tear that price up.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the players. I think at the top for me, DeJounte Murray with everyone out against Houston kind of has to be where we're looking. Makes a lot of sense to go there. As you scroll down a bit, I do think that Kyle Lowry is really interesting at 7,600. Right below him, I know you said Cole Anthony, who I do agree with, but Terry Rozier is 7,300 and has absolutely caught fire recently. So a lot of options there that you can use. I think you scroll down, obviously Dinwiddie with no Beal does make a ton of sense. If you want someone else that's a salary relief option, I'm actually really, really surprised that you didn't say it. Rajon Rondo has been playing well. He's always kind of performed well on a point per minute basis. Should get 20 to 25 minutes most likely as the backup point guard for Cleveland. Don't love the matchup against Utah. Also not really that opposed to it. So I do think that Rondo, who has now with Cleveland scored 22 plus in 3 straight, I do think that at 3,800, the price tag is it's a little, price tag's a little too low. But there are a lot of really good options that you kind of outlined at point guard. Moving to shooting guard, who do you have here?
To be fair, he was on my list. I felt like that list was just growing wide, longer and longer, so I just left him off. But yeah, shooting guard. A lot of these guys that we mentioned at point guard can also be utilized here, so I'm not going to really go over all of them again. I think if you want to take a shot on Jaylen Brown, I don't really have any issues with it. It's either him or Tatum who's gonna go off. I think he has the better matchup in this one against the Pacers. They just played each other the other night. think it went to overtime, but he had a pretty solid game. Other than that, there's really not a lot of expensive options that I really like. The first one I'm looking at is Bojan Bogdanovic, 5,900 against Cleveland. I played him last time. Of course, he had a floor game. But like when this guy's shot is falling, and like he takes a fair amount of shots, even with Mitchell and Conley in. The upside is just crazy. So I'm more than willing to go back to that again. No one's going to have him. He's going to be so low owned. You go down even more. Furkan Korkmaz is 5,200. I think his price went up 100, even though he kind of had a pretty crappy game. But it's against the Hornets. I expect this one to stay close. And yeah, I mean, if he gets hot, man, with that three, he can make 4 threes in 3 minutes. Like, why would you not want that? You go down a little bit more. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, his price really didn't change much. I think it went up 200. And they're just going to be without Beal. This guy takes a lot of shots already, so you take Beal off the court. There's just going to be more shots for him. And if it's falling, it's really nice. The more obvious one is Lonnie Walker at 4,600. Like you said with the injury news, the Spurs are just kind of depleted right now, and it's just kind of forcing him into bigger minutes. He can put up some peripheral stats too, so I like that. So you're not just solemnly focused on him scoring. Going right back to that team, Josh Primo. He's 4K now. He's getting up there a little bit. But I mean, it's the same. It's the same story, Like he's been starting. I don't see that changing again tonight. It's a really good matchup against the Rockets, who just don't know how to play defense or don't care to. Other than that, you could probably interest me in Corey Kispert. His shots got to be falling, but it did tonight, and like he had a really good game. He's going to be seeing the minutes, and if he's hot, they're going to run him for longer too. So you're looking at anywhere from maybe 20 minutes to upwards of low 30s from him. And at 3,500, I mean, you don't need much to pay that off, and with that many minutes, I bet he does.
Yeah, I think those are some good calls. There's 4 that I kind of wanted to outline here. You already touched on 2 of them. Up at the top first, Tyler Hero is way too cheap at 7,800. He's coming off a 33 real-life point game, 51 fantasy points in that game. Obviously, a ton of people out for the Miami Heat. The big thing here is that gets a matchup against the Atlanta Hawks. They absolutely bleed points to shooting guards. With Kyle Lowry in there, Hero's really just going to go play shooting guard. And he's a great scorer coming off of a big game that should continue. I do like him. 7,800 is a bit expensive, but I don't really have a problem paying that price tag for him. Another kid that has been on fire recently, coming off of a bad game, but his price tag is up a bit. I believe it's down 100 from his last game. But Malik Monk gets a matchup against Sacramento. The Kings are the worst team in the NBA against guards. I don't think really anyone's even that close to him. Malik Monk is averaging almost 40 fantasy points a game against them. So the $6,200 price tag isn't really going to make me shy away or anything. And then the final option is just way too cheap for the Spurs, Lonnie Walker and Josh Primo. Walker took 19 shot attempts, only scored 25 fantasy points in his last game. As long as he's taking 19 shots, his ceiling's significantly higher than that. That's more or less just casually his floor. And then Josh Primo at 4K is obviously a bit more than you kind of want, but realistically, he's getting relatively big minutes, and he's a guy that hasn't scored well in terms of fantasy, but his shot also hasn't been falling in basically any of these games in terms of volume. So I do think that Primo is an interesting option. Of the 2, I significantly prefer Lonnie Walker, who has a more solidified role in the offense, but both do make quite a bit of sense. As we move to small forward, I mean, a few guys at the top there that, you can consider. There's really only one at the top above 10,000, which is LeBron James. Gets the matchup, obviously, against Sacramento, who he recently only scored 47 fantasy points against. Obviously, they bleed points to guards, but LeBron kind of plays point forward. It's not like a guard's going to be covering him, but at the same time, do you trust him? And who are you looking at for small forward?
You know, I don't know if I fully trust him. I think there's a couple other spots that you can spend up on here and actually save a little bit of money. But I'd be more than willing to take a shot on him. I mean, more times than not, he's gonna get you there, especially with AD still out. So yeah, I really have no issues there. For me, you know, I'm finally on the bandwagon. Like, play Kyle Kuzma. His price actually dropped 400. He's at 8K. Gets a pretty solid matchup against the Magic. And as we kind of saw, you know, on Tuesday night, he just has the ability at certain points in time to just take over the game. I mean, he started off the game, I think, with 11 points in 5 minutes, you know, and it's just wild to see this Kyle Kuzma compared to the one we saw in LA. But I'm more than willing to take a shot at him here. I think 8K is a little cheap. You go down a little bit more. Miles Bridges against the 76ers, so 7,500. I have no issues there, especially with Kelly Oubre. I feel like he sees a couple more minutes because of it. I know there's other beneficiaries too, but he definitely sees a slight bump because of it. You go down a little bit more. Terence Ross at 5,300. This guy's been seeing his role increase since he's come back from injury, I believe. And I think the last 2 or 3 games he's seen about 30 minutes even. So I really don't expect that to change. If anything, it could go up. Then you drop down a little bit more. Keita Bates Diop's at 3,900. That's too cheap for a starter on the Spurs. Obviously, the Spurs was where we're going to find a lot of value. But I have no issues there at all either. And another one I really like is Cody Martin's at 4K for the Hornets. With Kelly Oubre out, you know, he's going to be forced into seeing some more minutes. He normally gets about, I don't know, anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes a game. I expect that to go up at least another 5 minutes. And if his shot is falling and he's playing well, he could see even more of an uptick. And more or less, that's about it for small forward for me.
Yeah, truthfully, the position's terrible.
It is. It really is.
A lot of nights, you know, if I come on and whether someone's on me or I'm doing a solo podcast, we get to small forward. I'm like, this is the worst position on the slate. Range true once again. I think you outlined it well. Essentially, if you're not playing Lonnie Walker, who I think is just by far the best small forward tonight, I don't really think anyone's that close. I can, you know, it's 10:30 the night before, and I can almost guarantee you that Lonnie Walker will be in my small forward spot on DraftKings. He's just 10 times as good as anyone else for his price at this slate. I do think that Terence Ross makes sense. You outlined him well. A little bit below him, you have Tim Hardaway Jr. Just going to play a bigger role with Porzingis out. But, you know, Luka's in, Jalen Brunson's in. So it's not like Hardaway has to go out and be this dominant scorer or anything. But 5,200 gets the matchup in Madison Square Garden. So I don't really have any issues with Hardaway. The big problem is I probably would just rather play Terence Ross. And there's not many scenarios I see where I play Terence Ross and Tim Hardaway Jr. So would be really tough for me to get Hardaway in there. That's about it, though. I do like your call on Martin. I think that his minutes also go up a little bit with Kelly Oubre out, and it makes sense. And then obviously, if you wanted to play someone like Josh Primo, who we already talked about as shooting guard, he's also small forward eligible. But truthfully, that about does it. I really don't like the position. We can move on to power forward. Who are you looking at here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is going to be this is semi-dependent on the Kyrie Irving news, but I mean, either way, I kind of like it. Kevin Durant at 11K gets a matchup against the Bulls, who they have some holes in their defense, and I think Kevin Durant can exploit them. 11K is pretty expensive for him right now, especially with, you know, Harden possibly coming back and Irving. If all of them are healthy, I probably don't go here. But I'm pretty sure Harden is questionable too. So, I mean, if both of them don't play, I mean, this is a really good spot for him. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I shouldn't have to do much explaining on Durant. He's coming off a 55 fantasy point game, I think. And yeah, enough said. You go down quite a bit here. That Tobias Harris is also questionable. I think he's actually probable. 7,700 against the Hornets is just too cheap. This guy's shot has not fallen for like the last 10 games, and he takes a lot of shots. So I mean, eventually the shot's got to fall, right? So at 7,700, that's a really good spot. Charlotte's not good against the power forward position whatsoever. They can't defend it. So I really like him here. He'll probably find a way into my line if he plays, which he should. Go down a little bit more. John Collins at 7,400 against the Heat. I'm pretty wow, I can't think of his name right now. Capella is doubtful. I really don't expect him to play, so that's going to put a little bit more of a role on John Collins. Should give him a little bit more of rebounds, and it's just a pretty good matchup right there. Going more or less going to be going up against PJ Tucker, who I'm not really too scared of. Other than that, I cannot believe this, but Duncan Robinson is solely a power forward tonight on DraftKings, which I don't think he has ever played this position at any point in time for any team. But 5,100, it's not bad. I mean, let's face it, he's really a shooting guard, small forward sometimes. But I mean, again, if this guy's shot is falling, 5,100 is not bad. I think his last game he put up 33 or 34 fantasy points. So you can definitely sign me up for that. You go down a little bit more. Carmelo Anthony is 4,800 against the Kings, and again, just a terrible defense. His shot hasn't really been falling. The minutes have more or less been solidified there. I think he sits around that 25-minute marker. And if he gets hot too against a terrible defense like this, I could see him paying off value there. And then the last one I'm going to say is Onyeka Okongwu, 3,900. Probably will pull the start if Capella sits. And, Gorgie Dang is coming back, yeah. But, I mean, at 3,900, you got to figure this guy's going to see probably at least 20 minutes. There's just not a lot to not like. I mean, he could easily sit into a 10-point, 10 rebound and double there. And for that price, I mean, you kind of want that,
No,
yeah. I mean, more or less, that's what I'm looking at. If you want, you could take a shot on someone like Jason Tatum or Julius Randle. I just really don't like either of their matchups too much. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me at the top, you have to look at Kevin Durant. Hopefully, I guess not hopefully, but if James Harden's out, Kevin Durant obviously becomes an elite play. If James Harden and Kyrie Irving are both out, then Kevin Durant becomes more or less a lock. Underneath him, Domantas Sabonis. If all of the Indiana guys are out, then Sabonis obviously becomes a really good play. But again, we're just waiting on that news. I think for me personally, you just have a cluster of players that are slightly underpriced. At this point, then you have Maxi Kleber, PJ Washington, and PJ Tucker all in the exact same price range. I think it's 4.8, 4.9K. So each of the three of those, I believe, can be used. Of the three, it's really tough. Washington's probably the riskiest. I would say PJ Tucker is probably my favorite, followed by Kleber, followed by Washington, but I don't have a hard stance on any of them. So if you feel good about one of the three, obviously, feel completely free to play them. And then if you drop down slightly more, Chuma Okeke returned a few games ago. He got back up to 34 minutes in his last game, actually dropped 32 fantasy points against Washington. Now he gets a matchup against them once again. So I do think that Chuma Okeke is a really, really good option on this slate. Kind of important to note that he dropped 32 fantasy points and only scored 8 real-life points. So the upside is significantly higher than that if his shot's actually falling in this game. Outside of that, I agree with you. There's kind of two cheaper options that I want to look at. KJ Martin has just been really consistent. It's not like his minutes are necessarily locked in, and he's certainly not locked into big minutes, but he's been consistently putting up, 20 plus fantasy points. And if he does happen to get a few extra minutes in any given game, he does come with 30 fantasy point upside, and he's only 4,000. And then right below him, you already talked about it, but Onyeka Okongwu feels like the Hawks are really comfortable. There's been talk about them shopping John Collins. They don't want to take on this ridiculous, massive rebuild or anything. They're actually going for playoffs. I think it was in talks with for Ben Simmons, basically. Sixers wanted to add Tobias Harris. Hawks said absolutely not. They're not taking on his contract, and it's been kind of a whole thing. But the main point of it from the Hawks side is that it looks like they're willing to trade John Collins, and if that's the case, it's likely because they feel okay about Onyeka Okongwu. The big thing is, in his last game, he played 38 minutes, looked really good, but Gorgie Deng didn't play that game. Deng has already been ruled in for this game, so he's back. So I don't think we see, close to 40 minutes out of Okongwu again, but really only needs 20, honestly, to potentially hit value at 3,900. So if he gets, 25 to 30 minutes, really, really good play there, in my opinion. So I do think Okongwu is way too cheap on this slate. And outside of more or less Durant, and I guess you can throw Sabonis in there too, just based on injury news, you're probably spending down because there's a lot of guys that feel a little bit mispriced at power forward. Moving to center, we do not have the free square in Nikola Jokic. So who are you looking at for center tonight?
Yeah, just to touch back on Indiana, like if all those guys are ruled in, and again, we're just waiting on the news, but if they're all ruled in, I just don't see how you play any of them. All that usage just gets spread out so far with LeVert, Brogdon, and all of them. So I mean, I don't mind the Sabonis as long as they're all ruled out. But again, we're just gonna have to wait on that news. So for center, I guess you can start. We can start at the top here. Joel Embiid, a little over 11K. Gets a really good matchup against the Hornets. I was talking about Tobias Harris. The Hornets just can't guard bigs at all. I think it's a little better with power forwards than centers, but it's Joel Embiid. They are getting a couple players back, so that's a little worrisome. But I mean, it's Joel Embiid. I'm more than fine than just plugging him in here because he can just add in all 5 categories and can just dominate games at any point in time. You go down a little bit more, Nikolai Voushavik. He is on a back-to-back. Gets a matchup against the Nets. I don't see anyone in the Nets that's really going to stop him. That's more or less it. This guy can double at any point in time. I haven't played enough of him this year, and I really like the spot for him. You go down a little bit more, and this might actually be my favorite center play. Jarrett Allen's at 7,900. It's a little too cheap for him. Going up against Jazz team with no Gobert, Whiteside does not scare me at all against Allen, as they have Mobley there as well. But this dude just smashed his last game, and this is a pretty good matchup for him too. And again, I just think the price is too low. I find this to be that this is going to be a very competitive game against two very, very, very good teams, and I'll definitely have some shares of him. You go down a little bit more. Christian Woods at 6,900 against the Spurs. I don't mind that matchup at all. If Houston's more or less gonna keep this close, Woods gonna play a big part of that. And on the other side of that, Jakob Poeltl's only 6,300. I think that's a little too cheap for him, and I have no problems going to him as well. Other than that, I don't think I saw too many cheap options I really liked. Yeah. No, that's more or less about it for me. I guess you could You could interest me in Montrezl Harrell. I think I personally think that this guy is going to be getting traded soon, so he's gonna be seeing a little bit more run, if you ask me, because they got Thomas Bryant coming back. I think he's available to play tonight, and they just don't have a need for three big men like that. You can also put Rui Hachimura in there with him, so I think they're going to showcase him a little bit, so teams can see what they're going to be getting. So I'd be more than happy to take a shot at him at 4,700.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think obviously the number one play is Joel Embiid. Charlotte can't stop any centers, and Joel Embiid's literally the best center on this slate. He's one of the best centers in the entire NBA. So really tough not to love Embiid on the slate. Moving down a little bit, under 6K, you have two guys at 6,900. Omar Yurtseven is a really good play still, just getting a ridiculous amount of rebounds. Gets the matchup against Atlanta, who obviously won't have Clint Capella, most likely, which means that they're going to have an undersized center for most of the game unless they want to play Gorgie Dang, which I doubt they want to give him massive minutes. That means Yurtseven and his elite rebounding is going to go against John Collins or Onyeka Okongwu, both of which really are a little bit too small to guard him. Then Christian Love, you already talked about. Jakob Poeltl, also very clearly too cheap. But right under him, Hassan Whiteside. I do want to mention it because Hassan Whiteside is the type of guy that can go out there. He can drop 20-20. He can get 10 blocks in a game. The upside's ridiculous. The downside is that he gets a matchup against Cleveland, who is one of the better teams in the NBA against bigs. It's tough to know at this point because it's not like Whiteside's 3, 4, 5,000 anymore. He's 6,400 or 6,200. Not just an elite plug and play, but I do think that he is viable, even in cash games, I guess, at this point. And then the only guy that I really would be considering spending down for that we didn't already talk about, a power forward, would probably be Alex Len. You already have Damian Jones ruled out. You have Rashawn Holmes ruled out. So Len probably draws a start. He's been playing, 23 to 28 minutes in his last 3 games, dropped 39 fantasy points in 28 minutes. He dropped 30 in 23 minutes. So the upside is clearly there for 4,000. Gets the matchup against the Lakers, who he played them the other week, I think it was, and he dropped like over 20 fantasy points in only 18 minutes. Really, they didn't have an answer for him when he was on the floor because, they were playing LeBron at center. They kind of made the Lakers change their entire strategy. They had to play Dwight Howard a little bit more to kind of stop Len, which always a weird thing to say, but I guess height and size kills at times. But I do think at 4,000, he's a viable option, but that's probably as low as I go. I guess if you want to take your shot on someone like Devontae Cacok, he's 3,400. He played 23 minutes in the Spurs last game, dropped 25 fantasy points, dropped 25 fantasy points in 16 minutes the game before that. So at 3,400, that would be completely fine. It's just he also comes with quite a bit of risk. I do think that the matchup against Houston is really good, though. And if this game would turn into a blowout, not sure that we're going to actually hit that with so many guys being out for San Antonio. But it would give a little bit of extra run to Cacok, who probably would really benefit if the starters got pulled. And he seems like the kind of guy that they would want to get more minutes to just to kind of see what he could do. But that's probably it. I believe that is all that we have for you guys tonight. Again, big 9-game slate. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. You can find all of our content at dfskarma.com. Good luck tonight. Hopefully everyone has some success.